Hi, I'm Kristen. Disrupting traditional management consulting through the power of AI technology is not just a movement, it's the heart of our mission. Here at Culturefy, we're empowering leaders and employees to take action. But more importantly, we're dedicated to creating work-life cultures that are world-changing. I'm so excited that you decided to join us to be part of this roundtable discussion as we explore fused intelligence, where human expertise meets the power of AI. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're continuing our series called Fused Intelligence, where together we'll be diving deep into the fusion of AI and human expertise to unlock your team's potential, drive brand performance, and just foster a future-ready workforce. And while we're here every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, if you've joined our previous series, we are switching things up a little bit in the format, alternating between panelist discussions like today with our panelists of subject matter experts and deep dive sessions we're calling Q&AI, where you can unpack your specific questions or unique challenges and explore AI solutions with members of our team. So it's a little bit more one-on-one conversation to really go into the nuances of what you're hearing us talk about today, but more personalized to your context. So if after today's conversation you have specific questions or a use case you want to unpack with some members of our team, please make sure you register for our next Q&AI session for next week. But before I jump too far ahead, I'd like to welcome our two panelists today who are helping us explore the power of fused intelligence to create cultures of collaboration, breaking down silos, streamlining communication, and just enhancing overall productivity. There's so much that we can talk about today. And today, I'd love to introduce you to our first panelist, Betsy Rodriguez, who is a CHRO, most recently working at Children's Hospital Colorado, which actually recently claimed the #1 spot in Forbes' list of America's best large employers in 2024. Now, I know children's hospitals tend to do fun at work pretty well, but Betsy, I'm excited to hear a little bit more from you about what that really looks like, especially, the Halloween flash mob that it seemed like everyone takes part in and was a lot of fun. Um, but Betsy, thank you so much for being here. Would you like to say a few words just to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks, Kristen. I'm really excited to be here, and I want to thank Lucinda who helped connect me. Culture is one of my favorite things to talk about. I am in week 3 of retirement, so I don't know what it looks like yet. I'll let you know, but so far it's been awesome. Gives me a chance to do things like this. I spent most of my career. I started going to graduate school to be a psychologist, and I got interested in psychology and business, which of course leads you to HR. And I spent most of my career in higher education and then in healthcare. I've been a CHRO for about 17 years, and I've always been in very large, multi-site, very complex organizations where I think culture is very challenging for those reasons. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Well, thank you so much, Betsy. Really excited to just dig into your experience and hear from everything that you've learned over the years and what you're seeing take place today in 2024. And we also have Lucinda Smith, a former global CHRO and our very own senior culture advisor here at Culturefy. Welcome, Lucinda. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you care to say just a few words to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kristen. It's great to be here again today. And thanks, Betsy, for joining us, and really excited to have our conversation here. I've done this several times now, so I feel like the audience should know me, but it may not. So I'm, as Kristen said, a culture advisor with Culturefy. I'm a former CHRO, semi-retired. In addition to the Culturefy work that I do, I also work with the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, and that's how I know Betsy. I'm an executive advisor with the Executive Network, and it's a great membership group here at SHRM, there at SHRM. And here at Culturefy, we've got a great team. We're doing so many fun and great things, and hopefully these webinars are reaching our audience and getting them more accustomed to what's going on in AI. It's such an important trending topic. Everybody's, talking about it these days. You see multiple articles and studies in the news. So it's just an exciting time to be involved with HR and with AI. I'm a former CHRO, mostly involved in manufacturing and global human resources. So I've dealt a lot with different cultures. with employee cultures, brand cultures, national cultures, but done lots of cultural training. So it's really fun to see what's happening in the world of AI, human resources, and culture, because these tools will really help promote cultures more and help people work together better. So I'm excited to talk about our topic here today. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lucinda. And again, just really excited to hear from you both and tap into y'all's experience in this space and just what you're hearing about how we can take organizations to the next level, leveraging the power of what we call fused intelligence here at CultureFi. So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about leveraging AI and how it can break down silos across departments, across teams, by really pinpointing misalignments and disconnects within teams, but then also providing actionable solutions to create thriving connected cultures. So there's a lot there that we can really leverage if we unpack it a little bit more about from strategy to our frontline employees. There's so much that we can unpack to really create thriving connected cultures. So now, as a reminder for those of you who are tuning in live, please make sure to use the chat function. We want to hear what's working in your organization. We want to hear what's not. What questions do you have? And specifically, you can drop anonymous questions in our Q&A. So just make sure you pop that out. It should be right there at the bottom of your Zoom screen, right next to that chat function. Please drop your questions in there. I have a ton for Betsy and Lucinda, but I know we want to make sure we're answering your questions as well. So please take advantage of that, and I'll try to get to as many as I can during our time together this morning. And then to kick things off, I just really want to first define what we mean by fused intelligence. So it's the name of our series. You'll hear us talk about it a lot. But at CultureFi, fused intelligence is the blending of, or the fusion of, human expertise with the power of AI to cultivate a thriving culture and propel brand performance through people performance. So in other words, AI is really so much more than maybe what we might think of when we think of AI as simply automation or even analysis, but leveraging fused intelligence is really tapping into the ability of AI to be a strategic partner, incorporating machine learning and advanced algorithms to learn from data and adapt, really helping organizations and leaders and even individual members of our team to identify problems and develop solutions and implement change. So there's a huge potential there of what we can leverage when we can really tap into the power of AI, or fused intelligence, as we refer to it here, of just the blending of human expertise with the power of AI. So there's that definition of how we define it up on the screen. And so we'll be referring to that throughout the conversation, just so you guys know a little bit more about where this series came from. So when we think about AI in those terms, that really, it opens up a ton of possibilities for organizations, for leaders, for members of our team. Before we dive into kind of the nuances of maybe some solutions or some of the trends around this technology, I wanted to kind of start with, what are some of the biggest challenges facing organizational unity? So that's what we're talking about, breaking down silos. So Betsy, I'd love to kind of hear from you if you wouldn't mind kicking things off. Just, what are some of those biggest challenges facing organizations who are trying to have a more connected, unified culture, the kind of culture where everyone would show up for that flash mob every year?
Yes. Love our flash mob. Can't wait to talk about that. I'm sure I'd be happy to. As I was thinking about this question and I was looking back and over my career, I think there's really three things that are the biggest challenge. And I'm going to talk about teams, and I'm going to talk about our demographics that we need to know about. And I want to talk a little bit about actions and words and whether those are aligned. But let me start with teams. And I'll be curious to see if Lucinda has seen this trend as well. Every place I've ever worked and every survey I've done or every problem we've worked on, it always comes out that my team's great and everybody else is the problem. You're laughing, Lucinda, so you know, right?
I know.
So that there's an interesting challenge there, that if you think your team is great, but everybody else in the organization is the problem, then it's going to be really hard to create that organizational unity. I'll give you an example. When I was at one of the large hospitals in St. Louis, we were working on a patient handoff, and actually in a surgical situation, that's one of the most important and critical events that happens in a hospital. when a patient goes from leaving surgery and the team that did the surgery to the team that's going to take care of the patient, there's important communications that have to happen. And it's one of the biggest risk areas, frankly. And when the teams got together to talk about it, it was that, well, we're fine, but the other teams aren't doing it right. And when teams started thinking about what would the other team need to know to be successful, it kind of changed the dynamic. And we were able to really make some big changes and really reduce that risk. So I think it's really important that you figure out how those teams can work together, not just within a team. And then the second thing I mentioned was demographics. I think you've got to know who your employees are. And you may have different groups of employees that are going to react differently. And I think it's hard to have an organizational culture if you don't understand those different groups. You may have a culture that kind of tends to align with one group and leaves another group out. So I'm huge on understanding your demographics and really understanding what drives those different demographics. It may be different what drives your frontline team members versus what drives your middle level managers, for example. And then the last point I wanted to make was my comment about the connection between words and actions. You may say all the right things. Maybe your mission statement is great. You describe your culture in a certain way, but it plays out differently. And we can talk more about this, but particularly around leader behavior. Do your policies align with what you think your culture is? I've just seen, lots of examples where people say one thing, but then what they actually do is different. And employees pick up on that in a nanosecond. They will point out those differences. And so to me, those are three things that really, really challenge the organizational unity or our culture.
Yeah, Betsy, I couldn't agree more. Alignment and communication, you mentioned both of those. Those are so important. And we have so many challenges today that really can impact organizational unity. We've got folks working remotely, we've got varied employee schedules. And so when we look at these things, I think there are some solutions that AI can present to help, connect employees better, to help with collaboration tools and working together. I think there's a real opportunity with AI to enhance jobs and kind of supercharge the employee experience, which, in turn, I think helps with the things that you mentioned. We're also seeing a lot with employee burnout, and I think these tools help to address that also. I wanted to share kind of one specific example, because I think, Bessie, you're talking in general terms about the cultures. And I think one of the things we're seeing a lot, and this is something that Sharm has looked into recently, it's, the different generations at work. And this isn't new. I remember 20 years ago when I was at another company, Georgia Pacific, I was talking to their finance team and they're like, can you talk to us about, they had like a conference where they brought people in globally. And can you talk to us about the different generations at work? It was just, the research was new then, and how they work together and what are the challenges and what is this about baby boomers and Generation X and all of this? And it's funny because it's still there. And it's even more so because now we have, 20 years later or so, even more generations in the workforce. But I found this really interesting example where there's a company using a platform, an AI-driven platform, where they make it easier to create relationships between employees of different generations. So and this is appropriate for you and me, but as they have advisors in their organization, and as those advisors plan for retirement, they help prepare the next generation of workers to retain and help grow clients through creating mentorships and networks between the generations. So I thought that was really cool. And this kind of platform can really be a great tool for a lot of things, but it helps combat stereotypes and, often the misperceptions that arise between the different generations. And the platform uses a matching algorithm, and it leverages different dimensions, I think like something like 50, where they look at tenure and location and business area skills and performance ratings, and they match people from different generations in networking or mentoring relationships. So I think, that's just sort of a real life example where you can help the situation. And not just, generations, but you can use these kinds of things for mentoring, with your ERGs. So there's some really cool tools out there that I think as we use them more and more, we're going to see hopefully some of these issues and challenges and that we've seen so much in the past, maybe, I don't know, minimize those. And of course we'll have new challenges, but 'cause we're never free from issues and challenges in HR. One we check the box on one and another seems to come up.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about, Lucinda, just in knowing your people and connecting with your people. And one of the things we talk a lot about at Culturefy is just that mentorship ability and where AI can really help tap into that by really analyzing who is in your organization, especially if you have remote or hybrid teams or multiple campuses. I think being able to connect people, recommend a mentor. If I don't know, I've never connected with Betsy in my organization, but maybe that would be a great person to just connect with. She's open to mentorship. That would be something that we can explore. And so I think there's so many tools out there with AI that we're able to really just help better connect people, bring people together, but also, like you said, speak to the different generations. Because I think there's so much value um, in understanding the different perspectives that we bring. And it's about kind of bringing those together a little bit more. And I think, Betsy, you mentioned that too about, how do you bring those teams together so that there's communication and handoff and the expertise of one team sets up well for the expertise of the other team.
Kristen, can I jump in here for a second? What the slide you just showed reminded me of something based on what Lucinda was talking about as well. I think what's really great about using AI and those kinds of tools to build community is I think it really helps our diversity efforts. I think it could be a great tool for inclusion. We tend to go toward people that are like us, right? If I see somebody and I think, oh, you're kind of like me, maybe we should talk. But I think AI kind of levels the playing field, if you will, and really goes after those things that might actually connect us better, things we have in common that don't have anything to do with what we look like or maybe some of our other diversity areas. So I love that kind of a tool from an inclusion perspective. It might make people really feel more like they belong to the organization.
Absolutely. I think there's so much power in just asking about your people and understanding, especially like you said, when you're in these huge organizations, sometimes it can be overwhelming to think, how do I really get to know, the manager of your team knows the team best, but how do I really get to know my people? And so even something as simple as sending out pulse surveys and then leveraging AI to be able to analyze that data and then to see where things are trending, where is your culture on point? Where is it not on point? I think there's so much power there. Well, you've both mentioned a little bit about some of the tools that can help us begin to navigate, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper about how can we make some of this AI technology more accessible for really aligning cultures and connecting people at all levels. Is there any examples that you have or any thoughts around just digging a little bit deeper into the AI technology and just making it a little bit more accessible?
I'm happy to jump in. I think there's two things that are important. One is education, and we've talked about how different generations are and how the education levels can be really different. So I think you have to educate employees about what is AI. It's a little bit scary. Some people think, well, if I use it, maybe it's going to replace me. And that leads to my second point. I think an organization has to be really transparent about why and how they're using AI. If I encourage you to use AI and then you find out that some of your teammates are no longer here for various reasons, you may link those things. So I think we always have to be really careful about how we communicate these things. So I think it's really important that we educate people on why and how we use them, and then we're really transparent about what our organization is intending to do with it.
Yeah, Betsy, that's so important. And I think I had a conversation about this with some folks yesterday about their AI it's been around, yes, and we use it every day, whether we know it or not, just with spell check and on our phones and all of those things. And I think there's this, I think, wave that's going to happen in the future where there's in organizations, there will be more of a democratization of, I can't say that word very well, democratization of AI. And that's going to happen in a couple of ways. I think you'll see once you get the basics and the education down and the policies and those kinds of things, that I think companies will enable employees to develop their own AI applications to help them and their teams be better at their jobs. But then, it's the larger companies now that are really getting into this. I think eventually smaller companies will be able to, through various tools that we're talking about, through consulting and partners, will be able to deploy some of the same AI capabilities that now are in the larger corporations. And I think it's kind of like what we saw several years ago with Excel and Lotus. That was also democratizing. I can't say that word, you guys, sorry. But it was bringing that data analysis to everybody, enabling small businesses to really perform analyses that were maybe reserved for bigger companies in the past. So I think, these tools are going to come down to employees at all levels and all companies, but it's going to take, I think, a long time to do that. Well, not a long time, but a few years at least. It's not, happening overnight. But I think AI accessibility is also going to depend on the nature of work. Again, it's if you've got a phone or office suites, it's there. But how are we going to make that leap from the everyday to this supercharged AI that we're talking about? And I think that's a big challenge out there. But I think, we can start small too. One of the things I've done in an organization is set up a community, and there was some AI involved. There's more and more now, but like an internal kind of a Facebook that's AI based that can help, especially with remote workers, can help them connect to, if they're not in an office, to connect people who do similar activities, maybe not the same kind of job, but the same kinds of things across an organization, to connect people, to give them a video platform so that they can connect. They can have those water cooler conversations that you would have maybe in an in-person office. And also, I think what's really cool is having these avatars too, right? I mean, in HR, and this is happening now in some organizations, we do a lot of talking to employees, and we're doing training. And how cool is it? Because who has time, to do this all of the time, and who has the resources to do, to shoot videos for employees all the time? But we can set up these avatars where it talks like you, it looks like you, it says what, you need to say to the employee populations. And I think getting the leadership into using these kinds of tools is going to help foster alignment and connection with employees, because you're going to have the opportunity to be in front of them more often. I remember years ago, doing quarterly town hall meetings with employees and having this huge production with this satellite broadcast and all of these things. And now we've got this stuff at our fingertips, and it's AI enabled. And so to get those messages out to employees, foster that alignment, and get to everybody at all levels, even people at a manufacturing floor, which was traditionally very hard to get to folks. Everybody's got a phone, so you can get to them through these AI tools on their devices. It's really cool. I think it's very powerful, and we're just now using a very small percentage of this. So I think it's really going to take off in the next year or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the learning piece that you both mentioned, just on how we can use learning, digital learning to help educate people, maybe, get rid of some of the misconceptions, some of the fears, and we can really educate our people on how to leverage AI. We say a lot at Culturify that It's not, AI isn't about taking your job, but taking your job to the next level. So, Betsy, to your point about the transparency, so to hear from leadership, we're providing this training to help you know how to leverage it because we want to invest in you. We want to prepare you. We want to give you the skills you need for the future. I mean, that's powerful to hear as an employee. And Lucinda, to your point, I think there's so much power in the AI technology from video creation, bringing departments together, right? So that now it's easier for someone like me to maybe create a module utilizing some of the AI technology that makes it easier, uses avatars, streamlines editing, to make it easier to collaborate between your marketing department, your HR department, your events team, to really just streamline things and bring people together. So I think that's a really powerful tool that can really move the needle in a ton of different ways when we're talking about just that transparency, that education, bringing people together around some of the misconceptions or maybe the questions that we just all have when it comes to AI because it's moving so fast. So I'd love to chat a little bit about cultural alignment. And I know we've mentioned a little bit about this. So at Culturify, we talk a lot about that your culture is your brand in action. So it's just so interconnected. But when we think about developing culture alignment, aligning your culture with your organizational goals, what does that look like? Maybe what are you seeing organizations do to do this well? And then maybe how is AI coming alongside to maybe help take this to the next level if organizations are saying, we do this pretty well already, or maybe we're struggling with some of these challenges. Can AI help us in this space as well?
I'll jump in here. I think it's so interesting that organizations spend so much time on their external brand, time and money. I've seen this over and over in organizations, especially in the nonprofit worlds I've been in. The money is spent on the external brand, and very little attention is paid to the internal brand. And I think without the strong internal brand, it really has an impact on your overall brand. So I think as an organization, you've got to really try to bring those two things together and understand, is there a difference between your external brand and your internal brand? And now I'll give you an example from my most recent position at Children's Hospital Colorado. I mean, can you think of a better mission? You're saving kids' lives, right? It's an incredible mission. You would think that that's why people work there, right? And that's what the senior leadership team assumed. I partnered with the head of marketing communications, and we did an employer value proposition review. And that's not why people come to us. It might be in the long run why they stay, but it's not why they come. Why they come is the traditional things that you see in other organizations. They come because they want professional development. They come because they think it's a flexible environment. That it may be the total rewards package, whatever, but brand or mission, I guess I should say, was kind of low on the list. It wasn't off the list. It was definitely on the list. But it's an interesting perspective because I would always say to this person that I was a co-sponsor with is, can you make the internal brand look like what you do for the external brand? We have an impeccable external brand. Why is it hard for me to hire? It shouldn't be hard if our brand is that strong. So we did some fun work together around that employee value proposition. And I think one of the things you have to do is look for ways that you can connect the internal and external brand. And you mentioned our flash mob earlier, so I want to use that example because it's a fun one. So for years and years, every year, Halloween is the biggest holiday in a children's hospital. It's just by far the most fun day. Everyone dresses up. The physicians, the nurses, the patients, the parents, everybody dresses up. It's a lot of fun. And what we started years ago was a flash mob. So all of us behind the scenes learn a dance, even if we aren't dancers. And we got lots of external help on that. And then at a certain time, everyone gathers in this main atrium of each of our hospitals. And it's videotaped. If you want to see something really fun, if you want to have your day just made, go to YouTube and look up the flash mob for Children's Hospital Colorado. But thousands of people dressed up in all kinds of fun costumes. All of a sudden it gets really quiet and the music comes on and everyone does the same dance. And there's kids lined up. We have glass walls up to about the fourth floor, and the kids are all lined up watching this, or they're down there dancing with us. And it's just a fun way to kind of pull in the internal and the external brand. It's talked about for months and months. People plan for it. It's talked about months afterwards. And those kind of events can really bring people together and really help them push that brand. So I think that's one of the main things that I would do is make sure that you're reviewing, is your external brand, I'm assuming it's really, really strong. What's your internal brand?
Yeah, and Betsy, what you said, I think it's just such a great story, and it's been recognized nationally. I mean, what a great example of culture and brand coming to life, and bringing people together, and people having fun and people celebrating. And when you do that well, that's what happens. And it's not, I think the recognition is kind of secondary, right? I mean, it's really fostering that feeling across a large organization. And it comes down, I think it's really cool too, because then it comes down to the patients, and that's what it's all about, right? Because those kids are the customers, they're the patients, and you're, getting them to be better, to feel better. But what a great, mission, that you all have had, and really blending, that culture and that brand. And I think, when you look at it sort of holistically, the culture and the brand can't really be separate. And a lot of culture building activities might fall under HR, but marketing spearheads the brand building activities. And in a lot of organizations that is separate. I think now in organizations, we see it coming together more. And I think, there's a risk that if organizations don't develop this, mutually reinforcing and interdependent relationship between culture and brand, then they really miss that opportunity to kind of unleash that combined power that you have. And if you don't do it, you kind of put the business at risk, I think, too. So there's really a risk of not doing it. But so when you look at brand and culture, there's really now, as we, have these AI tools, there really can be an intersection of AI and brand culture strategy. Brand identity and work-life culture should really be intertwined. And I think the companies that do that well, then, have more satisfied employees. They get, recognized in their markets. But with this, I think we'll be able to see more and more that AI can help harmonize these. And you can do it through, AI powered analytics and insights, through analyzing information from your employee, surveys, your pulse surveys. And through this, I think you can further craft a brand culture strategy even more than what we're doing now. And it'll link to values, it'll drive employee engagement and growth. And I think, there are different ways that you can do this, and I won't get into all of them, but I think it's very exciting because there are tools now that will help us to do this better, and be, I think, more targeted to different employee groups as well, which then ultimately I think will bring folks together even more in organizations.
I agree with you, Lucinda, and I think it's quicker too. So in my example where I talked about, we did this employer value proposition, and we learned that there's these key messages that we were missing, because when we were recruiting, we were focusing on just the external brand messaging. And what we did is we took some of those messages that we learned, and we used AI to restate how we didn't change the overall message, but we changed the subtle messages within there, about what people should be looking for in working at Children's. And it happened so quick using AI. It would have taken us, first of all, many discussion groups, right, to figure out the right way to do it. But it just happened so quickly. And I think that's one of the critical things about AI that can really help us, is that it's faster and it saves a lot of money.
Yeah, I think what you're talking to about with being able to analyze data, right? And being able to understand what is resonating, what isn't resonating, and to be able to pay attention to changes over time, right? So I'm not a data analyst. So if I had to dig through a ton of numbers, a ton of surveys, or even just the turnover rates as they're changing, is it dependent upon age group or demographic or experience level? So being able to see all of that at a glance and having recommendations of how you can be proactive instead of reactive. I think there's so much power there in being able to stay connected, but also unified together as an organization. To your point, because then you're able to kind of just say, this is what is really working, this is what's resonating, and let's lean into that with our organization. And really, identify the areas we want to grow in, and let's focus on that as an organization too. Which does kind of bring me to my next question around just how do we really, become more cohesive? So we've talked about a ton of different pieces, but how can organizations really pull all of this together? What are you seeing working well in terms of just unifying, especially when it comes to different departments? I think to your point, it's so easy for us to stay siloed because I work in HR, I work in marketing, I'm in finance, and yes, our worlds kind of overlap, but not as well as maybe they could. Maybe we're duplicating efforts. How do we kind of avoid that? What's working well in organizations these days to really have more aligned, and maybe how can AI help take that to the next level?
Your question gets me really passionate about this topic, which is leadership development. And I think leadership and culture are interdependent. You can't have a great culture if you don't have great leaders. And one of the things that's happened to us, I think, over the last 10, 15 years is that we put so much on leaders. And the slide that you just showed is such a great example of how AI can help a leader, because we tell a leader, what are your engagement scores? What is your turnover? How are your customer satisfaction scores going? How are you doing on internal? We ask them to look at all this data. And to your point earlier, if you're not a data person, it's overwhelming. And then what do you do with it, right? But AI shortcuts all of that. And if you can put all of those data into a wonderful dashboard, and it actually not only tells the story, but then it tells me what are the actions that I need to do. I think that's the best way that we can support teams, is to help support our leaders. And I think many organizations don't recognize how critical the leader is. You could have the best culture in the world, but if I work for a leader that doesn't live that culture, doesn't live the values of that culture, then I don't feel and see that culture. So I think it's super important that we really focus on leaders and help them to make sure that their actions are aligned with what we think or what we expect our culture to be.
Yeah, I agree. Leadership is, you've got to drive these things from the top, right? It's so important. And then another, I think maybe it's a little bit more of a strategic kind of way to bring this together too, is with organizations having their strategy and then their KPIs related to these. We've seen in some of the research I've done and some of the survey information I've looked at, you can use AI now to create smarter and better KPIs, and when we're talking about different silos in an organization, the different, departments, the different functional areas, the different sites, the different brands potentially in an organization or product lines, AI can help develop and design these KPIs and correct them and change them so much faster than, in the past, where you have a strategy organization and it takes, weeks and months, and you go back and you check these things. And if you put this into AI, where it goes down to the employee level, the department level, the employee level, corporate, divisional, whatever, it's really going to help and does help navigate these strategic challenges and even the day-to-day challenges more effectively. So I think it's providing companies with more insights, more accurate descriptions of the KPIs, and more predictive capabilities. So that too, then I think helps align the environment more if people can see that. And if an organization can look across a dashboard and see these things, more in real time than kind of, these lagging kinds of things that we used to see. I think it really will improve and is now even improving alignment between functions and allowing folks and organizations to become more agile and responsive to. But that can't happen without strong leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so helpful because I mean, when I think about different organizations I've worked with, you get cast the vision and big picture goals, but sometimes it's very hard for me to realize how my day-to-day job moves the needle at that high level. I might know one level above me, two levels above me, but if I go all the way up to mission, vision, and values, sometimes I get lost. So there's so much way. So I think, Lucinda, what you're talking about of AI helping from the goal setting, the performance goals, even from mission, vision, values, breaking it down, being able to say, okay, your marketing team, your HR team, this other team is coming together for this goal. And then within that, my task, my next step might be different than somebody else's, but it's breaking down silos, it's bridging teams, it's helping pull people together, and then creating opportunities for collaboration so that there is a cleaner handoff or easier collaboration because I know we're all working towards the same goal. I'm not just in my team or department bubble, which can be so easy, especially when we have such hybrid global teams where I may not work down the hall from somebody in finance, but we're working together. I need the information that they have. They need to know what's happening on my side. And so being able to bridge those things together, I think can be really, really helpful. And this kind of taps into my next question. So we may have already answered it.
Before you go to the
but
next question, I want to mention one more thing. Sorry, Kristen.
Yeah.
My hope, though, and my dream for AI when we talk about KPIs and goals and folks working together is I think, at least in my experience in organizations, HR works so hard to get people to get their goals set and to conduct their performance appraisals. And sometimes I think, unfortunately, we have managers who do that, but they kind of check the box. And my frustration has been, okay, everybody did it. So that's the quantity part of it. But what about the quality? And that's when I'm hopeful that AI will help maybe make some of these things easier. So maybe managers aren't just checking a box, but we're having more meaningful dialogue and conversations with employees, because AI will take some of the burden away from the process-driven part of it. And maybe it'll help facilitate the more richer conversations about employee development, and what employees really want to do for their next role and career planning and all of these kinds of things. But I think we've just gotten, at least in some of my past experiences, so wrapped up in just getting it done that we sometimes lose sight in just the whole experience for the employee.
I agree with you. Gosh, if we could solve the performance management issue, that we'd change the world. To Kristen's point earlier on her first slide.
So I'm hopeful that the process will be better with AI. I sure hope so, because we have some opportunities out there for sure. Sorry, Kristen, I just can't help myself.
No, it's a great point. And I mean, how do we provide that context so things are not just task-based and bring people together by helping them see the big picture and live it out in day to day? That's so powerful and can go a long way in retaining people, bringing that culture to life. So where it's not just something that you see or you hear, but in reality, is it really like that? But you're getting those brand ambassadors who are like, no, what we say, we live out, and this is the best place to work. You need to be here. Because, those types of messaging can often go a lot further than even our external messaging when it comes to recruiting and attracting top talent. But, and again, I think we've talked a little bit about this next question, but just to kind of, unpack it a little bit further, when we're talking about, again, fostering collective success, right? We talked a little bit about performance goals, and ultimately a thriving culture is amazing, but there is a bottom line. We need to move goals forward. We need performance. We need our organization to be successful, or our thriving culture will have no place to be. So how can we really leverage AI to help move those organizational values forward? How can we, what can organizations do to better foster that collective success? And again, we may have touched on some of this, but I just wanted to see if there's anything else you wanted to add around what does this look like? What are organizations doing well today And where can maybe AI help move the needle if that's some of the challenges facing some of our folks that are joining us live today?
One of our, in our recent conversation, we were just talking about how AI can really help us take those goals and use a lot of data to then help us build those KPIs and cascade those goals to the organization. And I think one thing that to me really struck me in that conversation is back to the very first point I made early in this webinar, and that is that teams often think they're great, other teams aren't. And I think AI can help level the playing field. Because if I now understand what the obstacles are for maybe your team and why you're having a hard time delivering, or I understand what your goals are and I may see how they fit with my goals, but they're slightly different, I may have a different understanding. And I think that can help pull teams together. And I think that's where organizations are going to be successful when multiple teams come together. You talked about silos earlier. I'm thinking, that how does the HR team or how does the finance team, for example, see how marketing and communications could be related? They're often at odds. You're spending too much money. We're not spending enough, right? So when they have those common goals and they can start seeing the data, it's transparent of what's going on. I think it's going to make a huge difference. I'm eager to see that opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's going to be really exciting to see how this and a lot of things play out. I guess, you talked about um, you know, putting dollars into different areas and different departments. And I think and we also look at this big picture in an organization. I think, when we look at some of these studies and we look across industries, we see employees using AI, and I think they can and they should feel more competent in their roles and more autonomous in some of their actions, and also more connected to their work and to their colleagues, to their partners and their customers. I think this is, best case scenario. But all of that should help drive success and support organizational values. At the same time, I think you've got this situation now, and again, it's going to play out, where is the company investing in AI for the overall organization externally, or are they investing in AI for their employees to help make their employees more successful? And I think that the relationship that we're going to see, and when this is successful, is the relationship between the individual employee value and the organization value are additive, if you know what I mean. It shouldn't be this zero-sum game with companies putting money into maybe customer relationships or data analysis and AI. I think companies are going to need to really step back and look at their AI strategies. And this is going to be easier for the larger companies, more difficult for the smaller companies. It's going to take more time for them, I think. But looking at where are our investments, and are we investing also in our employees to make them more productive, like the things we talked about today, working across silos and building community and building culture versus, are we just throwing money into external AI tools? So I think going back to the question, though, is if organizations are looking at balancing out the two, then they'll be more successful, embodying their values and driving collective success. And again, having a democracy of AI across their organization. I hope that makes sense. But I think as we look forward, those are some of the things we need to really be careful about in organizations.
Listen, I agree. What I would add is that maybe what organizations need to do is ensure that there's involvement of including frontline team members in the AI strategy. If your goal is to try to both make the employer and the employee experience better, then I think you need to hear from the employees. And that's probably one of the ways we talked earlier about how to get acceptance by employees. If they see that this is going to make my job better, it might make it better to work here, they'll be more invested in the strategy. Whereas if it's pushed down from the top, it's going to probably not be as successful.
Yeah, totally agree.
Well, you guys almost, I think, answered my last question of just really talking about what are some of the obstacles that you're seeing. So it really sounds like some of that obstacle is really just analyzing from a strategic level of why we want to implement AI, how we want to implement it, and how can we educate our people to make sure that they know how to leverage it. That does, you know, with so many buzzwords, AI is everywhere. Sometimes we use it and we are not even defining it the proper way. So there is definitely a priority that organizations need to pay attention to when it comes to that. But kind of as we're wrapping up, are there any other obstacles that you see facing implementation or adaption or integrating AI into organizations? And if so, what is some advice that you have for organizations saying, I want to explore this more, but I'm running into XYZ hurdle?
I think organizations are going to need to do all the things that you talked about, and put particular focus on the education, because there's a lot of media out there around AI and a lot of scary things being said. And I think, Lucinda mentioned this earlier. We all use AI. We just don't know that we're using it. And but so I think educating people that these tools can actually make things better for you. But if you just tell people that, they're not going to buy it. You're going to have to figure out how in your particular organization it can work. And I think it's going to work best if you find a quick win, or you find a quick education about, I bet you didn't know, but AI did XYZ for us. Or you find a way where it can maybe work with the employee resource groups or something where there's a win and people can really buy into it. Because I think, unfortunately, people are getting a lot of mixed messages about AI.
Yeah, I agree. Education and really a lot of communication and, educating that workforce. I think sharing success stories, companies who are doing this need to share their success stories about, what's working, and also, what's the long-term strategy for an organization. But yeah, I think, there are a lot of hurdles to overcome with this. There are a lot of obstacles. I think for global companies, it's going to be very interesting, because just in the last week or so, I've seen a lot of things coming out from the EU on regulating AI. So you're looking, kind of at the whole data privacy thing that we dealt with a few years back in global companies. You're going to have the same kind of thing with AI. I think California's got something that's out there in terms of, AI usage. So, a lot of it, I think, is going to be companies really trying to stay in front of this too. And it's changing so fast. We got to have trusted partners to work with also to help advise. I don't think companies can really go it on their own right now because of the dynamics of this. And it's moving so fast, and there are so many tentacles of it that touch so many parts of an organization and a business. So yeah, there's there's a lot. I think there's a lot out there that we don't know yet too, that will surprise us
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love what you said just about, empowering people, educating people, and working with trusted partners. And, one of the things that I think we talk a lot about at Culturefy when we talk about fused intelligence is just this ability for AI to come alongside and be a strategic partner to not just analyze data, but really offer, identify opportunities, identify problems, helping organizations be proactive, and really analyzing the data to provide recommendations. And the ability to do that at every single level, from strategy all the way to frontline workers, I think is so powerful, because sometimes, we talked a lot about leadership development and just skills development. Sometimes, I just need to be told a next step. I don't know the direction to head in my career. And so to be able to offer a recommendation, it really can help empower managers even who maybe have full plates, but by leveraging recommendations from AI can really help move organizations forward. But as you know, as you both said, there are a lot that we're learning. There's still questions. Things are changing so quickly. So tapping into those trusted partners that can really help say, okay, tell me more about your situation. What are your goals? What are you trying to do? Where are your roadblocks, and how can we help move the needle? And what is the best way to get started with AI? You know, sometimes we think, oh, we have to do all of this, but maybe there's a low level lift where you can get started exploring it, educating your people, and just seeing the transformation there. And that's what gets me excited about it, because sometimes as the non-technical person, I like to have bite size of help me understand this one step at a time and see the results, and then let's dream about what's possible with it. So thank you guys so much. I know there's so much that we could talk more about this, about building thriving cultures and then leveraging technology and how organizations are doing that, where there's still some questions. But, you know, thank you both so much for being here today. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kristen, and thanks, Betsy. It was really, really a lot of fun.
Yeah,
To be continued, right? More to come on these topics.
Oh, yeah. Lots of threads to pull here.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so for those of you who are tuning in live, if this sparked questions, more questions than answers, we would love to connect with you guys. You can always reach out to us at info@culturefy.com to unpack some of those personal solutions and share your use case of what you're looking to do, what your goals are. But better yet, we do have an opportunity just next week at the same time, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, for our Q&AI session, where we will be unpacking your specific questions. So if, you know, we didn't answer one of your questions today, please register, bring your team, bring your colleagues to that session, bring your questions, and we'll be able to unpack some of those, unpack your specific goals and challenges, and explore how fused intelligence, human expertise with the power of AI can really come alongside your organization and maybe help you move the needle in some of these areas that Betsy, Lucinda discussed today, and really just take your organization and your brand to the next level. So please make sure you register, spread that around your organization. The more people, the better. And we will see you guys next week. So thank you guys so much for being here today. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.